Hello, everybody. It's this day, Wednesday, October 9th, 2013.
If only people knew how many times you've said that already.
About 13.
What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about Carthage.
Didn't we
Again.
already do Carthage?
We did, but this is part 2. Okay. Part 2, we're going to be talking about the Punic Sicily Wars.
Punic Sicily Wars and the Punic Roman Wars.
Well, the first one.
The first one first? Is that what you're going to say?
The first one. The first one. Right?
Yeah. Oh, the first Punic. Yeah, the first Roman War. Yeah.
Yeah. The first Punic Wars. Not going to be covering the second Punic Wars. At least not yet.
You can go watch that on the History Channel.
You can go watch that on the History Channel.
Whenever they have actual history shows on.
Oh, isn't it a shame what the History Channel has become?
Nope. Porn Stars is the best show ever.
Just porn stars and...
What else do they even have on there?
I feel like every time I turn it on, it's just porn stars.
Yeah, it is. Exactly.
It's just like the porn star channel.
Yep. It's what people want. It's what the fans want. The viewers want. Stop trying to force feed them boring documentaries of history.
They used to just have like 24-hour marathons of like Hitler documentaries.
Well, yeah, that was That's when they started going downhill and they were just Hitler.
Yeah, and now it's porn stars and like alien history.
Oh.
What a crock of shit.
Yep. Speaking of aliens, 483 BC. Terilius.
Terilius, yes. So, up to this point, I guess we should really talk about the position that Carthage is in right now when it comes to Sicily. Up to this point, Carthage had not been involved military wise in Sicily.
Right. It'd been more of like it was like a soft power. They had a lot of influence on.
Right. Mostly trade, which of course.
Of course.
Is what they do.
Right.
But it is said in 483.
The alien.
That changed.
Confirm the alien Terilius.
Yes, the alien Terilius. Terilius's ancestors were aliens, most likely from Pluto.
Yep. But he was from Himera?
Himera. Well, I don't know. It's, it's one of those things. Don't really know exactly how to pronounce it. But
so,
it looked like
I'm not. I'm going to mess up the clan name again, the family name.
See, you know what I was thinking? I was first thinking it was Magonid, but then you got Mago. You have all these people. The name Mago was very popular, so maybe it's Magonid.
The sound thought process. I like that. Making it. We're doing it.
Magonid. Okay.
Making it.
That's it. Magonid.
So they're a powerful clan in Carthage.
Right, they're a political Carthaginian clan, and I guess they had a lot of presence on Sicily.
Right,
and they decided to come to the assistance of Terilius in Himera, who was pushed out by a fellow who goes by the name of Gelon or Gellin.
I like Gellin.
Like Gellin Magellan?
Yep. And he was from Syracuse, or no?
Right, he's a Syracuse tyrant. Which, there were tons of Greek tyrants.
Yes.
That was just their title. I don't think they were just like, a bunch of really
it's not
people in Greece.
It's not the modern day the modern day use of the term. So he pushes Terilius out of the city. Terilius asks,
and this was really part of a whole expansion of Syracuse. Gellin planned to expand, and he was expanding to other Greek cities in predominantly other Greek neighbors in Sicily.
Right.
And he was being generally very, very aggressive. So one of the things I'm not incredibly or entirely sure of is why exactly Carthage got involved.
I think it was just they were wanting to protect their trading routes in western Sicily.
So you feel that they were just being threatened by the overall aggressive nature
Yeah, they thought
of Syracuse.
Yeah. And they send, what's his name, Hamilcar? Is that how we're going to go?
Hamilcar?
How are we going to pronounce this one?
I was under the impression that it was pronounced Hamilcar, not Hamilcar.
But there's an L in there.
Yeah, it's Hamilcar, right?
This
Hamilcar?
podcast is just about pronunciation. That's what we're going to change this.
The pronunciation podcast. Yeah, it's Hamilcar.
Right. Yeah, but wasn't his mother or something connected to Trillius? Or is that another?
I don't know if she was connected to Trillius, but his mother was from Syracuse.
Oh. Huh. I was under the impression it was just to protect their trade routes, that they send this army to...
Right.
And what
happened? Hamilcar, I believe, was the biggest proponent of taking action against Syracuse, was he not?
Yes. And I like how, the system is, okay, you want to go do it, you lead the army. They
right,
send him
right.
over.
Yeah, and then they put him in charge of the expedition, so he's in charge. He goes over.
And what happens to him?
Listen.
Not good things.
He goes over, okay, and I guess he maybe rushed the gun a bit too, and possibly he tried to maybe surprise Gellin by leaving a bit early, by disembarking early and trying to get there as quick as possible to meet his forces. It didn't work out though. Now here's something this is one thing I don't really understand. Carthaginian letters were intercepted by Gellin's forces, okay, by Syracuse, and that really pretty much screwed up any kind of
right. Yeah, their plans were found out.
Right. Now, what kind of secret letters?
Like they were just sent, probably coordinating between different generals and different I don't know what the ranks were called, but different leaders of units, where they were going to attack, when they were going to attack. I guess if they were separated.
And so you think there's just like this one guy running across the field
Yep.
with like these letters?
Yep. The story the one I always know is in the American Civil War, where one of the Confederate generals, he read the note from Robert E. Lee, and then he wrapped his cigars in it and just dropped it on the floor. Like, he just dropped it in the field, and then the Union found it. And they're like, oh, we have all your plans. This is what this reminded me of.
Wow.
So, this guy could have been captured. He could have just dropped them.
I feel that he might have been captured.
Right.
See, but that's just it. I don't really know.
But, the messages were intercepted. Because they were coming through, through the sea. Maybe, they didn't all land together, so they had to coordinate between the troops or something.
Right, they're trying to, maybe trying to coordinate through different parties. Yeah.
Right.
So...
And
regardless, it was a disaster.
It was
it was an absolute disaster for the Meganids and Hamilcar. They were completely obliterated.
Hamilcar was killed.
Hamilcar was either killed. There's also stories of him taking his own life, possibly.
Yeah, I feel like that's revisionist. Like the Carthaginians want to make it sound like probably just had his head cut off by the enemy.
Yeah, most likely. So. After this...
So there would be... Oh, yeah, this... Carthage is not happy with this.
No, and Gellin receives tribute, bounty, obviously. Also, another thing is, a lot of newly acquired slaves, Carthaginian slaves. That's a pretty bad deal. So, the Carthaginian army gets wiped out, and then whoever's alive gets taken as a slave now.
Yep.
I mean, that's a real bad deal.
Yep.
You go to war. It's a terrible life. It's maybe hopefully you survive, and if you do survive, the best outcome is that you come back home and you live a modest life, really, and then you could die, or if you don't die, you become a slave and work until you're dead. I mean,
yeah, when you're reading this history, their lives are just brutal, just like endless warfare. Yeah. Killing,
just constant struggle and suffering.
I guess, if you had no skills or anything back then, if you weren't rich, it's like, I guess I'll be a soldier.
I guess that's really it, though. It's not even skill. It's just if you're not wealthy, So
So Carthage actually wouldn't intervene in Sicily for 77 years after this defeat. This is how bad.
Right.
This is how bad it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Wouldn't even get involved.
Right, and this led to political reforms in Carthage, and
Right.
Aristotle actually he would praise their new political system after this.
Yeah, he would. The Carthaginian political system was probably one of the only few that he praised. I mean, what? Carthage, he praised as well. Sparta, right? The Spartan
and I think
political.
Athens.
And then, was it the Athenians as well he did?
Yeah.
So...
because the Carthage, they would begin like electing almost executives every few years to rotate. They had their one assembly, which were all the rich people, and then they had they would let the lower class kind of like speak their mind in the other assemblies, and then they would elect every few years
somewhat of like a senate and a
right. And the other consequence of this first loss was Carthage got labeled kind of as Persian. They got lumped together. Because
the Greeks were able to tie them together.
Right, because Glenon would try to paint this as oh look, this foreign group is coming into Greek lands.
And Syracuse worked really hard to have this painted as a heroic victory for them, and eventually it did work. They were able to tie Carthage to Persia back through Phoenicia.
Right.
Because they were serving under Persian kings.
Right.
So they were really able to, it's interesting to now look, it wasn't just the Romans who hated these people, but also the Greeks now. Maybe, possibly, this was the start of that. This was the start of why the Greeks would soon also really, really dislike Carthage.
Right. And actually, I know, Glenon tried to unite Greece and he wanted to have a whole army of Greeks come over and clear to attack Carthage, and they didn't want to. And this was kind of the reason when Persia invaded Greece, the Syracuse, they didn't really come to help. They're like, all right, whatever. Like, you guys don't want to help us, we won't help you. So,
wait, where did Persia invade?
They're like 3 invasions in their...
Yeah, which one was this? Was this the...
I don't think this is like the Thermopylae,
Yeah, my favorite battle was the one with the Athenians, when they battled them back, and they actually fought them back, and they defeated them. The Battle of Marathon.
Marathon.
I always thought that was the most significant. Where everyone likes the battle with Sparta, but I mean that wasn't anywhere near as significant as the Battle of Marathon.
Oh yeah, well, Marathon was older. Marathon's the first invasion in 490 BC.
Yeah.
But regardless, so.
Well, 490 was that 490 BC?
That was the first invasion, yeah.
So that was happening around the same time this was. I mean, this was what, 480?
Yes.
No.
And then the second invasion is the one, I think, when they wanted Syracuse to come help.
And they turned them down.
Yeah. So, it wouldn't be until 410 where Syracuse's ally, Salinius, attacks Segesta.
Yeah, I would have believed it was Salinus and Segesta.
Right.
I think there's a racetrack. Isn't there a racetrack named Segesta?
Probably.
I'm thinking of something else.
Yeah,
it's a big famous racetrack.
Yeah. And of course Hannibal, Hamilcar's grandson, pushes the Council of Elders to get involved.
Yeah. Once again, another Barca. This is Hannibal Barca.
Okay, is it? All right.
I'm trying to confirm that, isn't it? That's our last name.
I don't know.
Barca.
I don't know.
Hannibal Barca.
I got very confused reading all these names for this time period.
Yeah.
Because they're very.
They start after a while. They start to blend into one.
Right.
So this is 410 BC, right?
Yes. And this time,
Hannibal leads this expedition.
The Carthaginians used mercenaries this time.
Right, they do. Mostly made up of Libyan levies and Iberian mercenaries. I guess they pulled a lot of forces from Iberia or today's Spain. Even in the Second Punic Wars, when Hannibal was going up through the Alps. They took a lot of Iberian and a lot of Spanish mercenaries. Carthage's ties with Spain at this point, I guess, there's some pretty long-standing ties with Spain.
Yeah, they weren't, that I know, really challenged there. I know, like, the Nubians challenged them in Africa occasionally.
Right, yeah.
But in Spain, I don't think there was anyone really... They kind of solidified their providences in Spain.
So, my details on the actual battles, or on the main battle, are a little fuzzy. So...
Are you talking about this battle with Hannibal?
Yeah. Now, the first... How many battles were there? You got that marked down, or...
No.
I know the two main battles were where...
They asked Syracuse not to intervene.
Right, and they were still able to maintain their peace treaty with them.
Right. I mean, the main takeaway I got from this, because, as we keep going here, there's so many, like, start a war, peace treaty. Start a few battles, peace treaty.
Right. Yeah.
I think the main takeaway from this phase was that this is where they started making the coinage to pay, because they had hired a mercenary army.
Right, and the coins had military distinctions on them, which meant
they had a horse and a palm tree were like their symbols.
Right.
But this was the first. Carthage never made coins before this. They never needed them.
Right.
And do you want to talk about any of those battles or no? I mean, the end game here is that like nothing changed.
Well, yeah. I mean, the end game is that I guess Hannibal was the first place that he marched into. Himera was the second place that fell.
I don't remember the exact locations.
Selinus first, so Hannibal went to Selinus, rid of them,
right?
And then after that, went back to Himera, and once again won again back in Himera. Some of the details of the battles were a little interesting, but I believe Himera fell in like 3 days. It's pretty quick.
That is quick, yeah.
And in Himera, they were waiting for the Syracuse assistance, and it never arrived. And they were told to just keep waiting, and it never arrived. And then at Himera, it said that Hannibal lined up the survivors of that battle and brought them to where supposedly his grandfather, Hamilcar was slain, and he killed all of them where he was killed, I guess, as a sign.
They're probably like, wait, who's your grandfather? I wasn't even here.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. And then at that point, they travel back to North Africa after the victory. Right,
and this would mark, then you start having regular intervention in Sicily.
Regular military intervention, or
whenever some city-state would step out of line or threaten ports.
I guess you can do that. Once you actually have some victory under your belt, you can then say, all right. As opposed to the first one where they lost, they're like, all right, well, we're gonna go hide for some time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because once they won battles and they have cities, now they're like established. They're like, all right.
Right. They've established themselves as an authority that could be respected.
Right. So now you have let's see, why am I always pronouncing these names? Dionysus.
I mean,
this isn't. Now we're in 397 BC, which isn't a couple years later.
Right. It's really that soon.
Yeah. Everything is so quick. It's like, peace, war 5 years later. Peace, war 2 years later. And this guy called for kind of like an ethnic cleansing of the Punic. Like, he didn't want any people of Punic origin in Sicily. This is Greek. I'm the Greek liberator.
Right, it was a single family.
Right, and I'm getting rid of everyone. This is kind of once he took to power, was his rally.
Right.
And they take now Motia,
whatever however it's pronounced.
Very
Motea.
Cool city, fort city on an island on the western coast.
Much like Tyre's later city would be. Remember how Tyre moved their city
right
out?
Yeah.
It's almost just like an island fortress.
Mm-hmm. You only get there by boat, and he goes and he just razes the city, just destroys it.
Yeah, the details of that battle.
Or what?
I don't know if they're all there.
What? Oh, how much detail we have? I don't think there's
Yeah.
much surviving. I mean, archaeological evidence confirms that the city was destroyed at this time. So
The thing is, city, it's just completely rubble.
Yeah.
It was blown up.
Yep, and because I think this caught Carthage by surprise. They had no idea that he was going to break the treaty. They didn't have any. They were not ready at all. So the city just fell.
Wow.
So they eventually push him out of the western Sicily. They try invading southern Italy and attacking some of his holdings there, trying to catch him off guard. But then there's a plague. Plague hits the Carthaginian army, and they have to sign peace in 373. And basically, right back where they started, nothing changes.
Yeah, just how many years of war and no effect, no change, nothing.
Yeah. Let's see. Whoop. So,
Theodorus.
Yeah, who do you have next? Do you want to go to...
So I believe it's pronounced Agathocles? Agathocles.
We are mere laymen of history. Okay, we have... These names are just killers.
I think that's close enough.
Eventually we'll get to a point in history where everyone's just named after New Testament guys like Mark and John, and we'll be fine.
Oh, yeah, it would just be like a million Pauls.
Oh, Paul, yeah. But for now, we suffer with these ancient names.
Yeah, for now, we suffer. So I think Agathocles is close enough. Agathocles of Syracuse.
Yeah.
Who was, once again, another Greek tyrant.
Yes.
Maybe not necessarily a bad guy. That's just what they were. It was a title.
Yep.
Also King of Sicily.
Well, I think he named himself that.
Don't they all, though, really?
Yeah. He never actually conquered Sicily.
just from 304 to 288, he was just King of Sicily.
Self-imposed. So,
self-imposed.
He was being sieged in Syracuse by the Carthaginians.
Right.
And he sneaks out, which, what does it even mean? How do you sneak out with 300 boats? Sneaks out with 300 boats and lands in Africa. Who knows?
He flew out.
Yeah.
He flew out.
Maybe the donkey flew him out.
The flying donkeys.
Yep. And so there were two generals in Carthage. There was Hanno and...
Another Hanno. Yet another Hanno.
and Bomaclar.
That's a great name.
So Hanno goes out to meet him and dies in battle. Bomaclar...
Wait, he went out to meet him?
He went out to go meet, to attack the Greeks.
Okay. So not they were there at the battle.
No.
And then he was like, I'm gonna approach you to speak to you before this battle.
They just stabbed him.
And he just stabbed him in the eye or something.
No. And
okay.
Bomaclar, he retreats because he goes, oh, that general guy, he's dead now. I'm the only general. I'm gonna go take over Carthage. So he goes back to Carthage. And he basically tries to overthrow his own city. He starts a rebellion because he wants power.
Okay. How'd that work out?
Well, so first they get news that... So look at this. Their army was defeated in Africa. They get news that Hamilcar was killed sieging Syracuse. Meanwhile, he didn't even stop the army from coming to Africa. Carthage is being sieged, and their own general is rebelling in the city. This is all happening at once.
So, just overall, not a great day.
This was not Carthage best time, really. So this is the other funny thing. So, Achilles, what's his name?
Agathocles?
Agathocles. He calls for Siren in Liberia. He goes, listen, join with me, and we'll take Carthage, and you can have all their land. Because he's trying to raise a bigger army in Africa. So they say, okay. He then kills all of their generals and takes their army. Like,
So he betrayed the mercenaries.
He betrays them.
Wow.
And he steals their army.
That must have done great for morale.
Yep.
Wow.
So back in the city, Bamaclar he's doing his coup, and the citizens rebel, and they kill him. So that doesn't work out very well.
No.
Meanwhile, this army... So, Aphicles goes back to Sicily because a bunch of his city-states were rebelling. They were declaring independence. So here he has Carthage on their knees, and he leaves his army in charge of his son.
Oh, and how old is his son?
It does not say. The texts do not say.
Perhaps young, maybe teenage years, maybe.
Yeah. So, the citizens march out of Carthage and just destroy his son and destroy the army. So this guy... and then Carthage and Syracuse sign peace, and back to the beginning.
All of that.
So all of that, and then Carthage survives. Now, I mean, who knows what happened if that city was destroyed right there by the Greeks? Much different timeline of events to follow, but they survived those dark days.
Yeah, really. Wow.
And now we move into the new player. Is Rome.
Yeah, the new kid on the block.
The new kid on the block, Rome. Rome's coming in.
Who I guess at this time really was the new kid on the block. I mean, really.
They were.
Still untested, especially, when it came to naval warfare.
Yeah, they had no navy. They hadn't even... They were just unifying the peninsula in Italy.
Right. They were doing their own work, getting rid of all the Italian tribes.
Right. And... Rome was unique because they built roads, they spread their laws. If you followed their laws, you were Roman, right? They brought everyone into their empire. It wasn't just like, oh, you're a conquered city now.
Right. And many times it was beneficial to be under Roman rule.
Well, yeah. I mean, who else was going to help you out, Who else you live under back then? Rome was an appealing master.
And that was a big difference between Rome and I think in a lot of places, many other places, is that they created a large pride. There was a lot of Roman pride that they spread. You could go all the way from across the Mediterranean, and they did their best to make sure that you were proud to be Roman.
Exactly. And they would defend any lands they conquered as if it was Rome itself. It wasn't just...
Right. Yeah, there was something to be proud of.
Right. So, how do you want to start this?
Yeah. I guess starting with this first Punic War, I mean, could really go for something to eat. I think I'm gonna go to the lunch car and get some kind of sandwich.
Really? And you get a Roman sandwich?
I'm gonna get some kind of club sandwich. What do you want?
I want nothing from you.
I'll get you a bottle of water. Okay, so I'm back. I got a sandwich. Frank, what did you get from the lunch car?
Pasta.
I didn't see that there.
Well, it's a special dish.
Alright, well, I guess we're going to be getting back into the groove here. Back into things.
Right. So
settling on down here.
So Carthage had been warring in Sicily for decades with really no noticeable gains or losses. Kind of like World War One here. Ancient World War One.
Yeah, ancient World War. Say World War One is for another day.
Yes, it's true. No, let's start it right now. Full history.
Boom.
So
what about them Austrians?
Yeah. That was that Ottoman Empire. So, in southern Italy, you have Tartanines, right? And they didn't like Rome. Rome was taking, was unifying Italy, modern day Italy, and they call to this guy, Bifurus. What is it? Pyrrhus?
Pyrrhus, right.
Pyrrhus.
Pyros.
Of Epirus, which is modern...
Pyrrhus of Epirus, or
which
Epirus,
is modern day
Epirus.
Albania. Is where he is from, yes. So he is the father of Albania. He's really not, but...
Father of Albania. Newly acquired title.
He didn't think that 2,000 years later he would get a new title.
He didn't think, but, well, here we are.
So he's like, well, why not? It's glory in battle for me. So he goes over there and he starts beating the Romans. He brought elephants. The Romans didn't know what to do against the elephants.
This was one of the first of many encounters that Rome would have with elephants.
And he brought Greek spearmen and like tactics that Rome hadn't seen before. And he actually pushes them all the way back to Rome. He camps right outside the city. So Carthage actually comes to help Rome. They send a fleet, and Rome refuses because they were nervous. They didn't want Carthage involved in Italy, in their peninsula, in any of at all.
I guess that makes sense. You wouldn't be too trusting of someone that you're at competition with.
Right.
In the Mediterranean.
Right.
So then want them coming in. Hey, buddy, I can help you. It's like when someone comes to your door, they go, "Hey, I'm the plumber." You don't tell your kid, yeah, let him in if he is a plumber. You always tell your child, don't let anyone in.
Right, so Carthage was the plumber of the Mediterranean, and Rome had a broken sink. And they did not want help.
Nope, they didn't trust them.
See, now I didn't write the name where this battle happened. This is where the Pyrrhic victory, where Pyrrhic wins against the Romans, a big battle, but he lost so many troops that he lost. You know what I mean? Like, it was disadvantage to him, even though he won the battle.
Right.
His casualties were so high.
It's kind of like an empty win, an empty victory.
Right. So at this point, Syracuse sends and says, "Hey, why don't you help us kick the Carthaginians out of Sicily?" So he withdraws from Italy. Now this guy's just like a mercenary for hire. But he was known as a very big general throughout the Mediterranean. Like, people knew of this guy.
Okay.
So at this point, Rome and Carthage signed a third. This is their third treaty to date. They signed a new treaty. Because Carthage gets beat back all the way to their one port city on the western coast. Now, part of the treaty was that they had to both together sign peace with Pyrrhus. It couldn't be like one behind each other's back and stuff. Like, they were one team.
So everything had to be on the table.
Right, but Carthage at this point, because they were getting beat so bad, they offer him gold and a huge fleet so he could sail back to Greece. They say, "Please leave us alone."
Wow.
And Rome is furious because they didn't know about it. They just offered this guy a fleet which he could use to attack Rome. So this is the first time you kind of see Rome not happy with Carthage, and maybe this is something that they don't forget later when push comes to shove with Carthage.
So you can start to see tensions between the two.
Yeah. Oh, now Pyrrhus says okay. He leaves and he goes back to Italy to attack Rome again. Really disorganized campaign. I don't really know what he's trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. In his spare time.
Yeah.
He starts war campaigns.
Right. So Carthage actually helps transport Roman soldiers. They provide aid through transportation, and Rome beats him at Benevitum in 275, and he leaves and goes back to Greece, and that's it. And he's gone. But
and then he stays there. He doesn't come back again.
No, he dies actually 3 years later, sieging some other city.
Oh well. There you go.
But this is the first real time where Carthage and Rome were intermingling, working together, having disagreements, and this would lead to the Maritines. And if you want to pick up here in 265.
Right, so the Maritines, now the Mamertines, as I believe it, they dwelled in Sicily.
Yes.
So these were basically a band of mercenaries, Italian mercenaries, who I believe they came from Campania.
Right.
So they're wandering around here in Sicily. Now I don't know if you noticed or not, but Maritime stands for Sons of Mars.
And what? I don't even remember. See, I'm not good with the Roman gods.
Mars. Well,
Like, is he a Mars bar or?
Yes, they had Mars bars. I think Mars was. I don't think it was just Roman mythology where Mars was.
Well, they're all based on like the Greek gods, right?
Yeah, the Greek. It was. I mean, it was all kind of closely or loosely.
He's the god of war.
Resembling. Right. Yeah, Mars is god of war. Obviously, Mars, the red menacing looking planet.
Right.
So the Mamertines, the Mamertines. What was happening with them was they were having problems with Syracuse, and at the time, the king of Syracuse at that time, or the tyrant of Syracuse at the time, was who?
I don't know.
Hero. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Hiero.
I don't know if he's really that. If he was really a significant tyrant.
Hiero the second. Hiero.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
So I guess they're having problems, and they're looking for help, and they seek help from both Carthage and Rome. Do they not?
Yeah, they do. And this is the way.
And
I don't know if it was just because, we'll just send it out to everyone like both these guys see who helps, or they're trying to play like. I don't know why they send it to both.
So Carthage is the first to answer the call,
right? Because I know there was a debate in the Senate on this. Because I think Rome knew that they were going to get dragged into Sicily now, which they had never set foot on Sicily.
Right.
Whereas Carthage was eager to help against Syracuse.
Yeah, always eager. So Carthage comes in, and Carthage helps them. Now, what they did for them was they spoke, or they came in, they mediated, and they came in and they pleaded, they kind of offered the Mamertines, or the Mamertines, a chance to get out of that situation, and they offered them a garrison somewhere in Sicily. I don't know.
Well, they garrisoned the Mamertine city. They put like what they sent a small force, and they garrisoned inside the city to protect them against Syracuse, right?
Right. Yeah, and I guess they weren't pleased with that. That really wasn't enough for the Mamertines, so they then went back to Rome and asked for their assistance. And this time, Rome, they offered to help them.
Right, and point. Rome sends an army down right to the straits between Italy and Sicily, and Carthage blocks them with a fleet. They're like, no, we don't.
But the thing is, I once again, it's like one of those things. Like, so they saw it was a problem in the beginning. They had political debates. They were debating whether to get involved or not. And now that Rome knows that Carthage has gotten involved, now that they know Carthage is involved, they then come back and now they agreed to help. I don't understand the choice that they made.
I mean, we don't.
If they didn't want to get involved before, why get involved now? Now that you know Carthage is directly involved now, why would you now choose to get involved?
I mean, I wish we had the scripts from the Senate of the debate, but
yeah,
I just imagine that they figured, I don't know, we could squeeze our way into Sicily. Like we could get in now. This is our excuse. And Carthage,
you think maybe, yeah, you know what, they were still ever growing. I mean, they were expanding their borders. So maybe they saw this as an opportunity to break into.
And as many the generals and people in the Senate wanted glory. They wanted conquest and to win and be famous. So it's like, that's kind of what drove them. And I don't think they really cared if Carthage was there. Right? It's like they came to Rome for help. Move. It's probably
Just like that was their attitude.
that was yep. So the Romans convinced the Mamertines to throw Hanno,
another Hanno,
out of the city. Get rid of them. We're going to come in and help you, and they do. And then Hanno is charged with a lack of courage. This was his crime, and he was crucified. A lack of courage.
Imagine being charged of that today in a court.
Oh my god.
You've been charged with a lack of courage.
Yeah, you are a wimp.
The penalty is execution.
So, the next is interesting because all of a sudden, this shows you how crazy warfare was in the ancient world. Carthage and Syracuse make an alliance against Rome. Here they are fighting for 100 years? They hate each other.
Yeah.
Alliance.
And now here they go. Well, I guess when you're backed into a corner, as Syracuse was, being in Syracuse, being on Sicily, hearing about Rome, what they're doing. I guess when you hear that, oh, they're going to be coming here. I guess, when you start to weigh your options and think, well, either we be destroyed by Rome or make nicey.
Right. With the dirty Punics.
Make nicey with Carthage. I guess maybe, you don't have much options. So most of the first Punic Wars, which I'm sure we're pretty much into now at this point, right? I mean, we're really
it's about to pick
pretty
up
much
now.
getting into it. Most of these wars were naval battles, and then land battles consisted mostly of skirmishes, small skirmishes and raids. I believe when Rome first landed in Sicily, they were pretty much uncontested when they first got into Sicily. I believe they took 2 cities or 2 towns when they first got in. And this is
Acros?
that is was that it? Acros?
Yeah. Well, when they first land, they send 40,000 troops, but they have problems with their supply lines. They can't.
Right.
So they actually signed a brief truce.
Right, and that was a problem for both parties, since Sicily was not a base of operations for either Carthage or Rome.
Right.
They needed constant support back from both Rome and back from Carthage in order to keep them going. I don't know if that. At this time, I guess this was maybe a new frontier for Rome.
Yeah, well, this is their first overseas invasion.
Their first
ever.
overseas campaign, yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of learning to be had here from Rome, and I guess Carthage had the upper hand because they had done things like this already. They had already gone to war in Sicily, so you would think that they would have.
And they had
when it
a much larger influence and empire at this time. So
yeah,
they
did.
were more.
They really did.
Yeah.
Not to mention, their huge navy, which Rome couldn't possibly hope to match.
No. But in 260, Rome does build 120 ships. Its first major fleet. Basically to counteract Carthaginians' navy.
And this was not what had happened yet with where Rome was able to capture one of
No, this is
Carthage's
before.
ships.
They just
This is
at this
before.
point this is where they started using the Corvus, the crow.
Right.
Their ships weren't that good, but they had this wood with like spikes in it. They'd come up and attach themselves. They'd dig into the enemy ship. So even if you were faster or whatever, they were latched onto you.
Right, they were caught onto you. You really couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
And the Carthaginians had these ships where they would dash. It's really interesting how the warfare would go. They would have these. They'd use the front end of these ships.
Yeah. And
they were so fast, and they would come right into the side of the ship, splitting, breaking those ships in half, and then just keep on going and hit the next one.
Yep.
I couldn't imagine, how hectic and crazy that must be, being on one of those
total
ships.
Chaos. All the wars at this time, it was like once they engaged, once the ships engaged, once like the armies engaged, it was just chaos.
Yeah. Well, I guess Rome maybe why Rome's armies were so effective was because they reduced that chaos. I mean, we can go into later on how organized they would become.
Right, but once, I mean, there's that good scene in Rome, the HBO show, where Mark Antony,
it was a good show.
Mark Antony and Augustine, they're battling Greece. They're talking to each other, like they're on the same team at this point, same side.
Right.
And Augustine goes, "How do you know what's happening?" And Mark Antony's like, "I have no idea." Like, once the armies are engaged, like they just have to fight for a while. Like, there's no
because I mean, there's no relaying back. There's no a radio calling back, giving instant progress report on what's going on.
No, and they just have to hack each other, and take some time to hack each other up.
Hack each other. So at this point, we're at around 261, and then I guess we can go over the Battle of Battle of Agrigentum. Agrigentum, I would say.
This was on the Navy one?
That sounds right to me. Agrigentum.
This was the Navy.
This was the Navy. This was a major naval battle between, you have, Postumius or Megillus, and then once again you have another Hanno on the Carthage side. Hanno and another Hannibal Gisco.
Yeah, they love these names.
They love them. They can't get enough of them.
Right?
They use these names like they're going out of style.
Yeah. I mean, eventually they did go out of style.
They did go out of style. Well, you got Hannibal Buress. He's a comedian. His name's actually Hannibal.
Is he really?
Yeah.
So what happened at this battle?
So at this point, what happens is Carthage loses. And the city falls to Rome, and Rome basically sold the entire population into slavery. Once again, the brutal truth of war back then.
Right. I mean, the shock here was that Carthage was supposed to be like the power of the sea, and Rome was beating them, mostly because of the Corvus.
Right. They were able to contest them. They were still taking quite a thrashing, though, when it came to sea battle, when it came to naval warfare from Carthage, until Rome was able to acquire one or two of
their
ships.
Fast ships.
Right, their ships, and they were actually able to, in a way, reverse engineer this ship and understand exactly the significance and importance of how Carthage built their ships, how they were not only able to build such successful ships, but how they were able to build them so quickly. What they found was that Carthage was basically, what they would do is they were almost built in kits. They would have the pieces out. It would come almost kind of like an assembly line. They would almost stamp these pieces out, have these pieces, the pieces pre-built, and then they would have the directions carved on the pieces themselves. And that's how they would learn to put these ships together. So they were able to mass produce these ships. They didn't need, these shipbuilders, these expert shipbuilders to build these ships. They could have lower level construction guys building these ships at a much faster pace.
Right. Yeah.
So once Rome,
like IKEA,
the IKEA, the Sicilian IKEA or the Tunisian IKEA. So once they acquired this knowledge, they were really able to start building these ships and building the ships in the same fashion, the same way that Carthage was, and this really helped Rome speed up their victory to the war.
Yep, and then everything you said is verified as historical fact.
Yeah.
So then the next phase of the war was Rome's invasion of Africa. They decided, listen, the Syracuse, they did it, and they almost won. Let's just go and siege Carthage. Skip this whole Syracuse crap. This whole Sicily crap. So, Regulus, what's his full name? I mean, you said
It was Marcus Atilius Regulus.
it. Yes, great name.
Yeah.
So he starts taking a few Carthaginian cities, around the capital of Carthage, and the refugees are all going to Carthage, and the city gets like overcrowded, and famine sits in, and the disease started coming in.
Was that his plan?
No, it
Or
just
was that was just a result. Okay.
result. He was like, well, he wants to kind of just build up his morale. Let me take a few of these smaller cities, but that was the result of what was going on, and he puts very harsh terms to Carthage. He goes, listen, you surrender. Like, one of them, they were absurd. I don't know if you read them, his peace terms. One of them was that Carthage could, you keep your city and all of your African holdings, but you can only have one warship. Your entire fleet, one ship. So
I think that's pretty generous.
it's very generous. So of course they reject this treaty,
Right.
and this is where the Spartan commander, what is his Xanathus?
Yeah, it's one of those names. Just the Z.
It's an
That
X,
sounds.
X-A-N, yeah.
Or X.
So I don't know why he comes to help, but Carthage appeals to him, and he comes and helps them, helps train soldiers in Carthage, and he says, "This is what you're doing wrong, X, Y, Z. Let me take over." They put him in charge. I don't really know his motives, but once again, Carthage on the verge of defeat here, comes in and he just beats the Romans in Africa, and he figured, well, you know what, all the Carthaginians are going to get jealous of me, and he goes back to Sparta. So just, if you're watching a movie...
It was a random act of kindness.
Yeah, if you're watching a movie, you'd be like, this plot's terrible, like, who wrote this? This guy just comes in and saves them and leaves.
Did he ask for anything in return, or
No.
Was that information is undisclosed?
Undisclosed. His contract terms were not disclosed.
Okay.
So Carthage at this point is really helpless. Rome continues to advance into Sicily. And let's see, who is this guy? Yeah, Carthage continues to put their generals to death after they lose. Which really, how are you going to build an army if you just keep killing all your generals? But
yeah,
I guess that was their prerogative.
And at this point,
all Carthage can do is hit and run. They send some fleets. They'll go attack a coastal
in a way,
town
kind of like
and leave.
guerrilla tactics, guerrilla warfare in a way.
Right. It's interesting that the coins that we have from this era were like poorly minted, low silver count, cheap metals, so that they financially restrained Carthage to pay their mercenary armies.
At least they paid them.
Right, well, they do for now, after the war.
Yeah.
So in 247, they ask Egypt for 2,000 talents. They ask for a loan. Egypt says no. Egypt had already started buddying up to Rome because they realized they were going to win.
You're right.
And in 241, the first war comes to an end. Carthage has to give up the rest of its holdings on Sicily, and the problem with that was they still had an army in Sicily, which wasn't defeated, and just now they just had this army of mercenaries. So if they had all died in the battle, they wouldn't have to pay them.
Right, but that's not what happened.
That's not what happened. So, I mean, this will go past the scope of what we're talking about today, but this army of mercenaries will return to Africa and not be happy with Carthage.
Right. Yes, they basically just returned and revolt, and that turns into a whole
nother
situation.
War. So Carthage loses Sicily to Rome. They lose all their few islands south of Sicily. They have to keep Sardinia, which I'm surprised Rome wasn't trying to get this whole time.
Yeah,
because it's close to Rome. It's not
really close to Rome, and it was an important trading post, was it not?
Right. At this time, Carthage was spreading into. They were going south into Africa and taking over Nubian territory. So, they lost the island, but they gained more territory in Africa.
Right, the Nubians were to the west and south of Carthage, and then that would once again. Problems with Nubia, with the Nubians, would occur later on, resulting in the second, directly causing the second Punic War, which we're not covering today. But
it's interesting that the Roman general Regulus didn't bother to even team up with the Nubians, which he could have teamed up with them when he was in Africa.
He could have, but he did not.
Yeah. Missed opportunity. Maybe easier with hindsight to say that would have been a good move.
Yeah. I guess when you don't really have the whole picture, though, of what happened, maybe he had his reasons.
Yeah, maybe he tried, I don't know, but he didn't.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to go over the terms of the treaty that was finally...
Oh, do you have them?
Signed. Yeah, I have some.
I know they owed Rome a lot of gold.
Right, and that was really, really the big part. I mean, Carthage was not allowed to attack Syracuse, and they were to pay ridiculous amounts of silver, or talents, somewhere in the vicinity of like 30, 66, like somewhere close to like around 100 tons of just an insane amount of money, which they would be able to, believe it, like, against all odds, they would be able to do. And not only that, but they were able to pay them off before their deadline, even.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we're not going to go into, what happens with then, Cato then comes back to visit them and see how they're prospering. That all leads to the Second Punic War, which we're not really going to cover.
Right. And when was this treaty signed?
This treaty was signed
241. 241.
Okay.
So actually almost exactly 100 years later is when the Third Punic War would end and Carthage would fall. So at this point they had
from this point
they had 100 years.
100 years left to thrive. And it's not like after this point they just kind of dwindled to nothing. They would come back again. There's a lot of things that happen within 100 years.
Right, but it was a tough. Last century was rough for Carthage. They're just warring in Sicily. Weren't really the aggressors. They're always on the defense, really a lot.
They were. Rome, Roman and Greek account might not tell that, but evidence would show that they really weren't the aggressors here.
Right.
It's pretty obvious that Rome was the aggressor. I mean, where was Rome not the aggressor?
Yeah.
No.
All right.
But this would pretty much start the end, I guess.
Yeah.
Of Carthage,
and starts the end of our 2 podcasts on Carthage.
Yeah, pretty much. That's gonna do it for that. Our stop is almost coming up.
Right. I think next time we're gonna try to do something much limited in scope, since we are novices at this. This was a hard topic.
Yeah. For anyone who has listened to this, both parts.
Praise be you. Yeah.
This was. I remember when we first started, we were like, this would be a great idea to do, Carthage, because no one really knows about it. But I guess we didn't really know what we were getting into.
How much research really goes into.
Right, how much research really.
I mean, I definitely learned a lot over this, doing this.
Oh, yeah. Learned a hell of a lot more than I knew before. And I thought, my knowledge on Carthage is pretty decent.
Nope.
But nowhere near as decent as I thought it was.
Right. So our next topic, again, we jump through history. We can go anywhere. I think
this train goes anywhere. This train goes anywhere you want it to go.
We have a good one in mind, so we'll see what we do. All right. Thank you.